Welcome to the Red and Gold Report, your best source for weekly Chiefs news. On this special edition of the Red and Gold Report, we're going to be looking at the Chiefs' big announcement of their roster cuts and depth chart heading in to the regular season. The Chiefs had to trim from 80 to 53 players, so we'll be exploring all of the moves right here on the Red and Gold Report. Hey, if you want your Chiefs news brought to you by a guy who has been in the room when players were actually cut, well, then hit that subscribe button right now to subscribe on YouTube to this channel. As we get started on this report about the Chiefs roster cuts, I just want to remind you of something that is so easy to forget as you think about your favorite NFL team this time of year. Please remember, these players that have been cut, remember that these are real lives, dreams, and hopes of entire families. For some of these guys, this represents the end of playing the game that has defined their life since they were little kids. I mean, I still remember when I was with the Chiefs personnel department going into the locker room, telling guys to bring their playbooks. You know, they knew what that meant. I know many of us have seen this sort of thing happen on TV, on shows like Hard Knocks, but this is more than a TV show. It's real guys' real lives. And as someone who's actually sat in those rooms, I know there's a weight to watching those dreams dissipate. There's a heaviness to it. So I don't want any of this to come across as flippant, and I hope you wish the best for these guys. With that in mind, here's how we're going to approach examining the roster on this very important week. We're going to be taking a position at a time, discussing who was cut, and then looking at where that leaves the Chiefs' current depth chart at that position. So let's start with the wide receivers, where there was a lot of intrigue about who was going to remain on the roster. Now, the big surprise here is that the Chiefs only kept 5 receivers. I thought they were going to go with 6. The coveted 5th spot went to preseason star Darius Fountain. Marcus Kemp was surprisingly cut for the team to get down to 5. Unsurprisingly, Marcus French, Dalton Schoen, Darius Shepard, and Garrig Dieter were all also cut. And as I predicted, sadly, the Chiefs cut 5th round draft pick from this year, Cornell Powell. Now, Cornell Powell was supposed to be a bit of a steal in the 5th round. A lot of guys had him in the 3rd round with his grade, but instead, he just didn't have any explosion or any ability to create separation in the preseason. So it was a good decision to go with Fountain instead. But I'm really happy with the team for this decision because it's so easy just to sit back and say, hey, I picked that guy in the draft, so I'm going to make sure that he makes the roster and not really make a fair assessment. So good job for the Chiefs, making the right decision, letting Fountain get the roster spot. He earned it. You know, websites are already reporting that Powell was a surprise cut. Man, he wasn't a surprise cut if you actually watched the games, right? Now that leaves the starters as Hill and Hardman and the backups as Pringle and Robinson. But the reason the Chiefs only kept 5 receivers is likely because they actually kept 4 tight ends on the roster so they could keep that tall, lanky Jody Forston on the roster. Forston was an undrafted free agent in 2019 who's switching from wide receiver to tight end. He's bounced around the roster, but he looked good in the preseason. Of course, Kelsey's the starter. Then Blake Bell is second on the depth chart. Then the 5th round rookie Noah Gray, who I was really excited about during training camp, but he didn't quite show a lot in the preseason. He is 3rd. Onto the offensive line, backup guard and tackle Yasir Durant was actually traded to the Patriots. You know, last year we were pulling guys off other teams' scrap heaps just to plug them in as starters in the line. And this year, another team just had to cough up a 7th round pick to pick up a player off our scrap heap. Yeah, we're getting better, right? Guard Kyle Long is on the PUP list with an injury. Tackles Prince Wanago and Wyatt Miller, and center Darrell Williams. They all got waived. No surprises there. The O-line will feature 5 new starters, 100% brand spanking new with Brown and Niang at left and right tackle, Smith and Tooney at guard, and Humphrey at center. Yeah, 3 rookies. The backup left tackle will be Mike Rimmers, who of course epically struggled at left tackle last year. And the backup right tackle is going to be Andrew Wiley. The backup center will be quality veteran Austin Blythe. And the backup guards will be former starters Nick Allegretti and the good doctor Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. Though really, don't be surprised if the team capitalizes on their depth at guard and trades away Laurent for a mid-round draft pick at some point in the next couple weeks. So that's the offensive line, which has been enormously improved since last season. In the least surprising move, the Chiefs kept Mahomes and Henne as their 2 quarterbacks and released Chad Bouchel. However, if there's one position that I am a bit surprised about and I disagree with the team on, it's at running back. The team cut preseason star Derek Gore, which to me doesn't make sense. To me, it's just not the right decision. Gore ran for a team-high 86 yards with a 4.8-yard average in the preseason. He added another 82 yards in the passing game. Disappointingly, Darrell Williams is listed as the second-string running back after looking slow and dealing with injuries in the preseason. I thought he was clearly outplayed by both Gore and Jerick McKinnon. But speaking of the speedy McKinnon, I'm really happy he made the final roster. You also notice if you look at the depth chart, Elijah McGuire is still on the depth chart on the website right now, but actually I think he's getting released with an injury settlement. And also to note is that former late round draft pick Darwin Thompson, who's been with the team for some years, has been cut as well after an up and down preseason. I think running back is a position the team really needs to be looking at the waiver wire to bring in a new player at. We need some depth there. Edwards, Hilaire, and Williams have been dealing with injuries, and Williams doesn't look up to the task to be a second stringer. So it'd be a great addition to add a player at running back. Jumping to defense, corners Boodle and Bo Peep Keys were cut. I'm sad to see Keys go, but mostly that's because I like saying little Bo Peep lost his sheep during every game, which I think I'm the only one that thinks that's funny. And strangely, Chris Lamons snagged the last corner spot. Former Giants first-rounder DeAndre Baker makes the roster as a backup, which is great to give us that upside. Rashad Fitton will also be a backup at corner. Ward and Snead, of course, are outside starters. Mike Hughes, a former Vikings first-round castaway who has played well in the preseason, both at defense and special teams. He's going to be starting at that very important slot corner spot. Well, then let's go to safety. At safety, let's talk about Devin Key. He was cut. Key was a huge story in training camp where he rose all the way to the second team. But he was like every Transformer movie. Yeah, the preview was way better than the real thing. His swift rise came crashing down as quickly as an avalanche. He allowed 2 back-breakingly huge passes in the preseason. I believe that really he actually allowed both of the biggest plays the defense of the Chiefs allowed in any preseason game. He just did not have the coverage ability and speed to make the roster. But I'm hoping he can get stashed on the practice squad. Safeties character Clemens and Anderson were also cut. Not really a surprise there. Former 4th rounder Armani Watts apparently did enough in the last preseason game to go on the roster as the 4th safety. And of course, Tyrann Mathieu is our all-pro starter. The surprise here, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, is that Daniel Sorensen is still on the depth chart, starting over Juan Thornhill at free safety. You know, I was hoping that was just like a coaching motivation thing by the staff, but it does look like the athletically limited Sorensen is going to get the start over Juan Thornhill at free safety. At linebacker, Cobb and Smith were cut. Darius Harris and Dorian O'Daniel are running 3rd string. Ben Neiman and Nick Bolton are 2nd string. Willie Gay and Anthony Hitchens are running 1st string. And I am crossing my fingers that Bolton can start over Hitchens sooner than later. At defensive end, there are really no surprises there, but a few disappointments. Harris and Edwards were cut, and sadly, preseason absolute standout Tim Ward was waived as well. Ward clearly played better than the newly re-signed Alex Okafor, who is the second stringer on the depth chart. So I'm hoping Ward can make it to the practice squad. Fourth round rookie Joshua Kando came through with a roster spot at the very last minute, possible by finally playing well in the third preseason game. Mike Dana will likely be the first defensive end off of the bench, has a good anchor, not a lot of explosion, but okay. And in one of the most interesting offseason moves in the NFL, All-Pro Chris Jones looked like the Hulk moving to defensive end in the preseason. Really, watch him. He could legit be up for Defensive Player of the Year. It also looks like illegal firearm aficionado and Scarface wannabe Frank Clark remains a starter at defensive end until his multiple court cases for illegal firearms from this offseason can move forward. I still think the team really needs to consider bringing in a new defensive end starter through free agency or a big trade. At defensive tackle, there were no surprises. Tyler Clark was cut. Wharton and the re-emerging Kalen Saunders will be the backups, with Jerron Reed, the free agent from Seattle, and Derek Nottie as the starters. That's all the position breakdowns for the cuts and depth chart. Another thing to know is that, like last season, the practice squad has been expanded to 16 players. So I'm hoping that players like Marcus Kemp, Tyler Clark, Tim Ward, and Devon Key can clear waivers and make it back to the Chiefs practice squad. But what do you think? Do you think there were any surprise cuts? Do you disagree with any of the decisions the coaches made on the depth chart? Let me know in the comments below. So thanks for watching this special roster cuts edition of the Red and Gold Report. If you want to receive weekly Chiefs news and updates right to your YouTube homepage, then you gotta hit that subscribe button on this video. Thanks for watching, and go Chiefs!